I've been running the Reef Factory KH Keeper on this tank now for around 7 months, so today I'm going to give you my long-term thoughts. Now, I was given this for free by Coral Compass, and I'm making this review now because they're sending me the KH Keeper Plus to replace this unit, so look out for that review soon. And if you're new here and want a weekly dose of reefing goodness, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out when I upload. Because this is a long-term review, I'll start with the bad things I've experienced, then I'll move on to the good stuff. As I mentioned in my first review, because the unit is quite small, it's also quite fiddly when it comes time to calibrate the dosing pumps and the pH probe. You need to rest the pH probe in calibration fluid for 5 minutes before the calibration starts, so if you don't have anywhere to rest the sachet, you end up holding it for all that time. Although for that reason, I decant the calibration fluid into a small container and place it where the sample beaker usually sits. Now, if you only had to calibrate every 6 months or so, the fiddliness wouldn't be a problem, and it only takes 15 minutes from start to finish. But in my experience, you do need to calibrate it much more frequently, especially the pH probe, which I think is a weakness of the KH Keeper. I calibrated my pH probe 2 months before I made this video, then I recalibrated it again as I was recording this footage. When I did so, the KH result changed from 7.65 to 8.1 DKH, so the KH Keeper had drifted by 0.5 DKH in the space of 2 months. Now, to be honest, I don't really care if my alkalinity is 7.5 or 8, so that doesn't really bother me. But I would expect the KH Keeper to hold accuracy better than it does, and if you're the kind of person who wants precision results, you're going to want to calibrate the KH Keeper every month or so. And even if you're more relaxed like I am, you'll probably need to calibrate every 3 months or so at the absolute most. It's also a little tricky to get hold of a replacement pH probe. As far as I can tell, they're not available in the shops or online, and you have to contact Reef Factory or the distributor in order to get a replacement. And given pH probes will need replacing from time to time, I feel like they should be more readily available. The reagent pump is also quite noisy, and for that reason I only set the KH Keeper to test when I'm in a different room to my tank. I currently test at 8 AM, 4 PM at midnight, which is perfectly acceptable and gives me more data than I need, but there are times when I'd like to test every hour for a couple of days in order to create a KH consumption map. But I don't do so because Mrs. Reef Talk tells me off for interrupting whatever nonsense she happens to be watching on Netflix. And on the subject of creating a KH consumption map, that feature is missing from the KH Keeper, and all alkalinity monitors as far as I'm aware. I personally don't trust any device to control my dosing amounts for me, so what I'd love is the option for the KH Keeper to test every hour for a week, then work out where my alkalinity consumption swings are, and suggest a dosing schedule that will result in a completely stable KH reading. I would then input that into my dosing pumps and it would run nice and smooth. Now, you can work that out yourself with trial and error, but an automatic KH map would be a game changer for me. The other feature I'd like is to be able to tell the KH Keeper what times I want it to test. At the moment you can only set intervals of certain hours and it will decide what time to test on the hour. So if you want to test at 10:30 PM for example, tough luck, it can't. And while the app is generally excellent, I'm not a massive fan of the graphs anymore, and I find them a tiny bit difficult to read. That's because of the random KH values it shows on the x-axis to the left. For example, here, the reference values it gives are 7.3, 7.91, then 8.51. But I feel it would be much easier to read at a glance if those values were 7.5, 8, then 8.5. The good news there is that the history list is really useful and easy to read and gives you your last 20 odd results at a glance, so I just use that. Now, as you may know, the KH Keeper glows either green or red to indicate if your KH is in range, or blue when it's running a test. But I found that the light being on 24/7 meant I got a thin film of algae on the sample beaker after a few months, so I've turned that light off, which is a bit of a shame because the light looks pretty cool, although my KH Keeper sits in my cabinet, so I never really see it anyway. Now, as well as the things I don't like, I have experienced a couple of problems. A few months ago I started getting odd KH results, so I inspected the KH Keeper and found the waste tube had cracked. That meant the sample beaker wasn't draining properly, so my KH results were out. The good side of that though is that Reef Factory give you a spare tube in the box, so it was a really quick and easy fix, and because the sample water beaker is on display and not hidden behind the scenes, I could instantly see the beaker was too full, so identifying the problem was also easy. The other problem I've had was a wider issue relating to a firmware update. Reef Factory made an error of some kind with an update that caused everybody's results to be off. It took them about a week to fix it before they released another update that solved the problem. Now, because my KH is pretty stable, I just turned my KH Keeper off until Reef Factory had fixed the problem. But people who didn't do that would probably have been pretty frustrated, as their KH Keepers weren't running properly for a week. But that is a full summary of the problems I've had, and of the drawbacks I've found. You'll make your own mind up of course, but there's nothing I've seen that would make me want to get rid of the KH Keeper, and the pros still very much outweigh the cons. And speaking of the pros, there are plenty of things I've discovered over the last 7 months that I do like. I've been returning the sample water complete with reagent back to my tank for over 5 months now, and I haven't noticed any ill effects in my tank, and my recent ICP test didn't show anything nasty building up. Now, returning the sample water to the tank saves me storing it in a separate container, which takes up a load of space and is a hassle to empty regularly. The KH Keeper's control functionality, called Actions, is also very good. If you have Reef Factory dosing pumps, you can set the KH Keeper to dose more alkalinity if your levels drop too low, or skip part or all of a dose if it gets too high. And you can set it so it also adjusts the dose of your calcium, magnesium and any trace elements in the same proportion. Although, as I've said, I personally don't trust any device to adjust my dosing for me, so while I've testing Actions, I didn't run it long term. As to the reagent, I've only used about 2/3 of a bottle in 7 months despite testing 3 times a day, so the running costs are very low, and one £50 bottle should last pretty much an entire year. And while it is missing a few features, the app is still fantastic, and Reef Factory regularly adds new features. There are too many to mention in this video, but I love how fast they move and that they listen to customer feedback. And on that subject, Reef Factory say the KH Keeper Plus has a quiet reagent pump as well as an upgraded double junction pH probe that doesn't need such frequent calibration and is easier to access. Now, for my money, those are the 2 things that might put you off buying the KH Keeper at the moment, so I'll tell you if they've got that right when I get the KH Keeper Plus. If they have, I'll have pretty much nothing to complain about. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe for next week, and until next time, happy reefing.